Hello, everybody. My name is Raul Ramirez. I'm with the Catch Wrestling Alliance, and we strive to help you to elevate your grappling. But as a result, we together can keep real wrestling alive. Welcome. Thank you for watching and listening. We're on YouTube. We're also on Twitch, and you can get us here at any of the podcasting outlets. Like I whatever, and what Google Podcasts and whatnot. Oh, definitely Spotify and all that. Um, so it should be easy for anybody to reach us. I mean, but if you want to get the podcast directly from our website, you can definitely go easily to catchwrestlingalliance.com. It is all there for you. So I want to give a little bit of update about what's going on. So we have UCLA catch wrestling class that scheduled to start. Um, you know, was it like next week or so? But it's going to get pushed back a little bit or an extra week or so because of the COVID surge we're having in this country. So the university wants to just push everything back to in person stuff. Just push it back an extra week. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully, it doesn't get pushed back anymore. But just letting people know about that. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into today's subject, which is really cool. I think a lot of people don't know too much about this part of history, but is actually a really cool, um, just amazing part of history about an amazing man who ultimately you can think of as like the person who created the actual American, or what I often refer to as like the American lineage of catch wrestling. This man's name's Tom Connors. He was born in Lancashire, England. So that is where catch wrestling came from. Sometimes you can even sometimes catch wrestling has been called Lancashire wrestling because they named it after the region where it was developed. And so it wasn't developed in that one village of Wigan, but one of the most famous Lancashire wrestling schools was in Wigan, and that's the one that we refer to often. And, Billy Riley's gym, or sometimes people call it the Snake Pit Wigan and all that. Um, so, um, but that is because Wigan is one village in the Lancashire region. So this is the region where Tom Connors was born, and this is in the 1800s, right? It wasn't just 80 years ago or whatever. So this was in the 1800s, but then he came to the United States because after he started wrestling when he was young, wrestling professionally, or at least for bets, because that's basically how it was done quite often, where it's like if two people were going to have a wrestling match, then they would collect bets and then see who could win the whole pot, right? So two people would put their money in, and then they would wrestle to get the entirety of that money. And so Tom Connor started doing that at a very young age and was very successful at it, and therefore ended up coming to the United States. And he beat a lot of people, and a lot of people that we consider like high level grapplers, even to this day. Um, and the people, and the one person I want to talk. Well, let me just give you a couple names. So he ended up beating people who so it's kind of funny because this he beat the Strangler Lewis, right? So what people need to know is that the Strangler wasn't really like choking people. He was using they're using headlock techniques, and then they were trying to sell to the crowd as if though he was doing something particularly violent or whatever, but that was not the case. Either way, Tom Connors, a man being only about 5'6" in height and about 150 pounds, was able to beat him. He's also to beat several people, but the one that you need to know about that he beat several times was Martin the Farmer Burns, right? So we talk about Farmer Burns quite often because he became kind of like the grandfather, or kind of like the father of catch wrestling in the United States, because then he ended up coaching other very successful catch wrestlers, and then that lineage was then continued down to a man that we call, or a man, the late great Billy Wicks, who then passed on that lineage to a man that is our good friend, my good friend, and I've interviewed him several times, John Strickland, on the East Coast in South Carolina. So John Strickland is that lineage holder. So the lineage still exists today, but but what happened was on Tom Connor's tour of the United States, he met and wrestled against Farmer Burns, beat him like no problem, actually very fast, which a lot of people wouldn't really like. Everyone would be, a lot of people might be surprised, but Connors handled them easily, and it turns out, it seems like they actually became good friends, and then they would tour together, doing different wrestling shows, also different types of shows. Because turns out, actually, I would like to like I would like to. Well, I'm working on getting a historian in here about that time, because it seems like there was a lot of really cool entertainment things that Connors and Martin Burns were into. Connors in particular, he ended up doing like vaudeville stuff, and so all those types of entertainment things, and then also, of course, the sports stuff. So not only did Connors do wrestling, he also did, like, seems like some kind of speed walking type competition stuff like that. Really weird. I think it's like a speed walking type of thing, but they use a different name at that time. He's doing all kinds of physical activities, and actually one of his things, which probably resonates even down to Frank Gotch, because Gotch was an avid runner. Connors really believes in the whole cardio thing, and like making sure that you do your miles, get out there and do your cardio. It could have been a thing that maybe that if Gotch wasn't already doing it, maybe he was influenced, because what happened was is that Gotch, or sorry, not Gotch, but Farmer Burns and Tom Connors ended up spending a lot of time together, and this is why a lot of people, talk about um, Tom Connors being, Farmer Burns's like catch wrestling instructor. Right? They did spend a lot of time together. They worked together. Eventually, right after they met, and Burns got beat. They ended up. They must have, you know, they must have liked each other, and then they ended up working together for different entertainment things. And definitely want to try to get a historian, because I've heard a lot of these stories, and I don't want to tell them wrong. I'd rather you hear it from the straight from the horse's mouth. But Tom Connors in particular lived an amazing life, and I hope that um, we can kind of share this with you. But anyway, Tom Connors, because he was such a successful athlete in a couple different sports, then he was asked to write his book on how to become a better athlete, and that book was published in 1890, and it's called The Modern Athlete by Tom Connors. Right. So I think we'll kind of go a little bit into it. So I want to kind of talk about what he believes are the keys to success in catch wrestling, which I think you might be interested in. So this is closer towards the beginning of the book. So I think today we'll kind of keep it towards like what he says in the beginning of the book. Later in the book, he talks about different sports and kind of like how to train. I think this is why he calls his book The Modern Athlete, because one of the things he says is that back in the old days, which is really interesting because like this book is written in 1890, so that would be like the old days for us, but um, they were still older days, right? So Connors kind of says that, like, oh, back in the old days, all these coaches, they would just make people like work out until they collapse, and then force them to like work at almost like a slave. You just keep doing it, and and the coach is there as your like forcing you, yelling at you, and all that. And he didn't believe in that. He didn't, and he thought of other types of training methods, which he details actually in a big chapter. So I think we'll do that next week, which is really it's very interesting. But he talks about like which I think resonates today because you'll have people, which kind of reminded me of George St. Pierre, where he's talking about like he doesn't necessarily train for like too many hours a day and all that because truly you have to recover, but you have to make sure that you're training efficiently so that if you're going to be training less time, that you train effectively. All right. So I think that's one of the things that Tom Connor's training methods or methodology that we'll talk about, I guess, next week. Um, it kind of reflects kind of so there maybe that 1890 was probably maybe the beginning of this shift away from just like slaving away at whatever sport it is and doing the same thing for hours and hours every day, increasing your chances of getting injured and whatnot. Um, so that's we'll save that for next time. So hopefully you'll be interested in that. But this week we'll talk about what Tom Connors believed were the secrets to success in your sport. Right. So there's a chapter where he talks about the different grappling styles of that time, so including like judo and whatnot. But he goes through quite a lot of the different regional styles in England and United States and stuff. So just so people know that catch wrestling wasn't the only thing people were doing. Um, but he ends up saying that he believes that when you compare all the different rule sets of the different grappling styles, catch wrestling is ultimately the one that shows or that tests the athlete the most because, again, one of the reasons is the no choke thing, where he kind of talks about that because he'll then separate the chokes to self defense, which he there's a chapter on self defense in his book that we'll go over, which is pretty interesting. This guy's really interesting, and like some of the techniques that he suggests for self defense are very interesting. So I definitely want to share with that. So I guess that's another week, right? That's another week later. Um, so, but anyway, beyond that, um, the point. So it's like you have like the pins and you have the submission holds and you have this kind of athleticism and this freedom that is in the rules of catch as catch can wrestling. So Tom Connors believed that catch wrestling in itself was um, like the highest level of competition, right? At least with grappling stuff. And he also talks about like, yeah, you can have like running or whatever other types of athletic things that you can compete in. But for him, since he was a wrestler, he really valued the wrestling, but also talked about the rules. Let me go ahead and show you a picture of the book. So for those of you who are watching our live stream, or the video or whatever, this is what the book looks like, or the cover. Let's see. There you go. Modern Athlete. Focus. Okay, so let's get to the passage. So I'll read that to you because it's really short. I'm going to pull this up here. Now where'd it go? Okay. The rules for catch as catch can style are an embodiment of all the best points of the foregoing rules, without any of the bad points. And the author, during his long career, has wrestled the great majority of his matches under these rules. And these rules, in my opinion, are framed to test a man's ability to the utmost. Though it should be mentioned that to be an expert wrestler in catch as catch can style, it is necessary to have a perfect knowledge of all the different styles. And another most necessary adjunct to success is the following good points: gameness, science, endurance, and a cool, clear head. Right? What do you think about that? Actually, I should probably just repeat that. Okay, so What does he say? One, to be an expert, you have to have knowledge of the other styles, right? So you have to be kind of you have to. Well, he says perfect knowledge, right? So maybe try them out. Try to see if you can't get an understanding of these other styles, right? The other thing would be gameness, science, endurance, and a cool, clear head. Right. So, because he says, one thing to have the rules. And I think this is one of the things we talk about where it's like a lot of people understand the rules of catch wrestling. And that's one of the great things about catch wrestling because it's easy to tell a spectator what they're looking at. They either win by pin or submission. So it's very easy to understand. But then a lot of people don't quite understand the art of winning by pin or submission. So this is catch wrestling is a particular style, and it is an art. It is and it is something that kind of has its own way of being or doing things, and so it isn't just a rule set, right? So a jiu-jitsu practitioner can go in and win a catch wrestling match, but that does not make him a catch wrestler. So we have people trying to pass themselves off as like catch wrestlers or whatnot, where they whatever, like they know some pins or stuff like that. So he's trying to make that clear too, that it's like um, this is a style, but you can also become better at it by say knowing about other styles. So that means that's also a recognition that there are different styles and different ways of doing things, right? But also then we have the idea of gameness, science, endurance, and a cool, clear head. So let's go ahead and give you guys um, an official definition here. Okay. So when we talk about like uh, gameness, usually um, it's almost just like the willingness or the adventurous or the bravery or the courage to actually compete, right? Or actually do something, follow through with some action, right? So um, that that again, that is definitely a you know a key to actually becoming successful is actually showing up and not only training, but then when you show up to your competition, you do well, right? So you have, even though you might actually be scared of the competition, have like the performance anxiety and whatnot, but you still go through with it and you perform at your best, or you give it your best shot, then that's part of the whole gameness idea, right? The next thing is science. So not that he's a scientist or anything, you don't have to be a scientist, but that you can think of science also probably like as more like technique and strategy. So knowing that catch wrestling doesn't have the time limits, it will that will allow you to use different strategy and techniques to pin the person by or submit the person by wearing them out, right? So but you have to have the techniques and the strategy to be able to not get beat yourself, and to counter and to wear the other person out, make them do all the work, make them do all the heavy lifting, so that eventually when they're tired, then you can beat them, right? So that's one of the things. Um, Also, endurance. So he makes a big deal about cardio. Um, Again, like I think a lot of the greats. So I guess apparently since Tom Connors was one of the great catch wrestlers of all time, he big believer in cardio. So and then also another one of the greats, right? If you're watching the video, he's right next to me here, Frank Gotch, big time runner. He had all these, he had all these miles and miles and miles of space to run, and he ran, right. Um, so he talks about having that endurance so that you can, so you don't gas out during your match, really, and a cool, clear head. So this is the last point that he makes, and so doesn't mean it has to be, like physically cold, right? But you have to have the whole mindset aspect. So this is something that it seems like it has been around, but it's gaining more and more popularity. Actually, have a lot of the sports psychology podcasts and sports psychology stuff kind of going on. But this would be considered kind of like that whole mindset, sports psychology aspect that back in 1890 Tom Connors was talking about. So it wasn't that people were just like tougher than we are today. It's not exactly true. There's some things about about that. There's something to that notion, but it's not exactly true that people were tougher than they are today. There is the mindset, right? Um, that he even alludes to, right? So if he's talking about it, then that means it wasn't just a given that everyone at that time was brave and everyone was fighting. It's just not true. It's really just not true. But we learn about these exemptions to the rules because they were the ones who actually showed up and did stuff, right? So you just have to remember that too in your life. You actually have to show up and do stuff in order to move things ahead and move things along, and actually to get into a better place or to solve some problem that you might have. That's um, that's that's part of that gameness also that Tom Connors is talking about. But also that cool, clear head is something that is becoming a big thing, and which it's a very important thing, and which I think is really amazing that back in 1890 we have one of the best wrestlers talking about that, because he feels it's important and he feels that others should know about that. And we've also had a few different conversations about that in our live stream podcast stuff. So was it a few years ago, I had a one of my colleagues, a prominent psychiatrist here in Los Angeles, discussed that, where it's like you have to kind of think about when you're competing, like what is your reason to be competing, right? And if it's not for yourself, and it's not for like, if it's not because it's the competition is what makes you happy, a lot of times these other reasons might not help you, right? So you have to think of your why and not be like pushed, or not be necessarily uh, like not be doing it to just to impress a girl or whatever, because your family's forcing you. That's like a big one, right? Where your parents are forcing you, they're trying to live through you and forcing you to do something. That's never a good reason. That's never a good mindset to be in. So this is one of the things that again is addressed by Tom Connors. And um so you can think, oh, maybe he's really brave or whatnot, but I mean, again, he recognized that you have to show up and you have to have a reason. So he had a pretty good reason for doing all his activities. I think mostly he enjoyed all this stuff, and also he seemed to be very proud that he was born in Lancashire. And I think he's ultimately really happy to see how it spread throughout the world. And he mentions that, where it's like, oh, the Americans are really doing great at wrestling, and a lot of great wrestlers that he met out here. And um, so it wasn't like so much of a competition, like let's shut down the Americans or whatnot. Um, he was game, right? He was always ready to challenge himself, right? That's kind of one of the things you can kind of take, where you don't have to look at everyone like competition so much, or like someone to beat down or try to destroy, but you can think of these things as challenges, right? Especially if you enjoy doing catch wrestling, if you enjoy competing, then you don't necessarily have to have like any kind of negativity towards it as your reason to doing it. You could be thinking of it as a challenge, right? Just challenging yourself and having fun. That's probably the way to keep a cool, clear head, because ultimately that's what's going to keep you focused, and that's what's going to help you in competition. Because if you're just angry, or like you're not able to keep that cool, clear head, then you also become a little bit more blind as to when to like or when you can recognize when you can do a counter move or when you can do any kind of um, takedown or whatnot. So you can do an aggressive move, being on offense, or you might not know when to counter if you've been taken down or whatnot. So that's part of the cool, clear head. So that's one of the main things that is also very, very important. So kind of just to recap, Tom Connor's secrets to success is number one, understanding the different styles, right? And I think this is why catch wrestling can be applied to different grappling styles, so like no gi, and then even in fighting and MMA, because MMA allows for a lot of the catch wrestling techniques and even a lot of the catch wrestling strategies. So I think that's one of the things that if people were to have like a strong catch wrestling base, then they can easily apply a lot of the catch wrestling principles in other styles, whether it be no gi or MMA. So anyway, that's his first point, like kind of knowing the other styles as well. That's going to help you become a better or more successful in catch wrestling. But also, the gameness, so the willingness to show up, the willingness to compete, and then the technique themselves, right? The science, he calls it, right? And then let me see if there's, besides the cool, clear head, the mindset. Let me see if there's one more thing. Oh, endurance. Yep, you gotta have the endurance. So it's like you might know a bunch of different techniques, but if you gas out before you get a chance to use them, then you've lost, right? So no one ever gets to see them, right? So those are his building blocks, right? So know your enemy, kind of like with the knowing the other styles, um, understanding the other styles, um, and showing up, and technique, endurance, mindset. All right. Okay. So I think that was my main point. I spoke for like almost 30 minutes there. So hopefully it gets the point across. Shinhei is watching from New Zealand, and he says, "Good day, Coach Raul." He says, "Good day, Coach Raul." So I just envision it being in a, like Australian good day. Um, Marcus James, Lancashire in the house. Thank you for being here. Right, great to hear from you. Um, yes, Shinhei question: how do you shoot for takedown without banging up your knees? Um, well, you have to set it up, right? And also too, that kind of, you don't have to. You basically, ultimately, you don't have to. If it's banging up your knees, there's plenty of other techniques, right? Marcus James gives you some advice there by saying you could practice the Indian crawl. In the United States, we call that duck walks. You can try that as well. Daniel Almanza, how do you feel about weight lifting for catch wrestling? It's great. You have to. Um, that's how you protect your joints. Also the stretching. Right. Bonjour, bonjour, Ryu Ken. Bonjour, Shinhei. I think some weightlifting is a must in all forms of grappling to avoid. I just said to avoid injury and getting your body ready. Yep, I agree. Yeah, Robot Jocks. Connors has a cure for freckles in that, but yeah, I think we'll go ahead and talk about that in another week because it's pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. Um, yeah, Marcus James. Yeah, freckles don't really need to be cured. It's a really interesting. As I'm saying, it's a really interesting book. Uh, so we'll definitely go over different subjects about it because yeah, it is pretty. Well, even in the training book, he kind of gives this really long, detailed training program to get anybody into shape. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty interesting. But the thing is, I think he does have some good points in that it's a lot of stuff that are a lot of aspects that have been corroborated with science. Where it's like, so in the United States, we have this organization. called the National Strength and Conditioning Association, and they do a lot of research in like kind of like the best training methods and whatnot. And so, when I was a trainer for UCLA, we relied a lot on their research and kind of and also not just UCLA, but also a lot of their research goes into how our athletes are trained and whatnot. So different training methods, and then that's also one of the things that um, I was kind of trying to talk about earlier, um, where you don't necessarily have to be doing the same kind of um, like if you say if you're doing wrestling, you don't have to be only doing wrestling all day, and because sometimes this is one thing I kind of disagree with on some old timers where they say like, oh, the best conditioning for wrestling or the best way to get wrestling fit is to only wrestle, but no, it's you do have to get used to it. So you do have to do plenty of rounds of wrestling. But these other things like the endurance, so the rest there, the cardio stuff, the running or the oh, I don't know, something happened there, right? Okay, so hopefully you can hear me. Um, so hopefully you're here. Okay, it seemed to cut off for a second, but you have to be doing all these different things. So it's not only doing that one sport all the time. Right. So that's one of his points, and that actually gets corroboration by the modern scientific research. So yeah, you want to be doing the strength and conditioning stuff. That's why a lot of athletes in all sports are doing like the weightlifting, the cardio, the stretching and stuff. I think they're not doing as much stretching as they could be, but it is really important. So if you end up liking some kind of like yoga class or whatever, take it because I felt like that's really helped me as well. Ryuken. Coach Raul, what's your preference for dealing with opponent's underhook from half guard when you're on top? Um, well, it kind of depends how they move. I mean, you can actually kind of turn. So if they got this underhook and you can get your overhook, right? You can kind of start turning towards them. You can go for a double wrist lock. You can start going for a three-quarter Nelson. Um, you can actually do like a chancery type move or three-quarter Nelson type move, where you can start neck cranking them. There's a lot of things you can do. There's a lot of things you can do. It just depends on how they react. Loister. What age do you think is too old for a beginner looking to be scouted into a university team? I think it's just the eligibility requirements, right? There's like different eligibility, but no, I mean, if you have the ability, then you can then do it. Go for it. Because we even had a movie that just came out right about the man who was like in his late 30s and got into the Rams professional football team and was very successful. So it's a true story. Shinhei, luta libre is highly influenced has is highly influenced by catch wrestling, but a different art. Luta would be more close to BJJ, but it has some aspects of catch wrestling. Right. Yes, this is true. So, but yeah, like if you look at it today, it definitely looks a lot more just like no gi. But yeah, hopefully we can get our resident expert from Rio. Chiago, we've had him on. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, living in Rio, whose training partners include all the big names in jiu-jitsu. And he's also a historian, and an anthropologist. And so we've had him on talking about luta and the differences between luta and judo and jiu-jitsu, and hopefully we can get him on again because he has a lot that he wants to be sharing with you guys, but we just have to schedule a time. So Thea D, hello. Why didn't Dustin Poirier bridge to roll the Brazilian, forget his name, off and reverse instead of staying in guard and getting in guard, getting grounded and pounded? He pulled him in instead of could have bridged. He chose to stay in guard and keep his legs wrapped around him. Yeah, that's the thing. That could even also be like an endurance thing, a training thing, right? Because this is a thing where it's like what we're seeing is like Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is so popular, it's become kind of like part of the mainstream idea where people think like, oh, I have to be doing Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and so then you start competing how you train. So it could have been a fatigue thing where he kind of then just settled into guard, and that was it. It wasn't. It could. It might have just been something like that. Ryuken. Oliveira is sick. One wrong move and Poirier knew that he would be caught. Ambrosius Blem. I am a luta libre guy, and believe me, although it is heavily influenced by BJJ, they were the only opposition for decades. There is a huge emphasis on takedowns and top game. Yes. Coming from a luta libre guy. he put guy in quotes. So again, ultimately it is a different style. But doing and this is the thing, maybe with it's becoming like more popular that like people in the different martial arts are starting to do the different strength and conditioning things. But yeah, which I think is amazing is that we have one of the best to ever do it talking about these ideas back in 1890. So that's pretty amazing. And he also, again, he says that these other other trainers and coaches are not doing these things basically. So that's why he wants to kind of share his expertise with people. And let me get a drink of water real quick. All right. Thank you for bearing with me or whatever. So, Marcus, if he's still watching, I mean, how's everyone doing in England? Let me know. Hopefully, you're still watching. All right. Yeah, I definitely miss training in Wigan. Maybe we can get back there sometime soon. We'll see what's going on with all these different like travel restrictions and whatnot. It seems like a lot of the travel restrictions are coming back. But we even have what in Australia right now that a tennis player is being detained because I guess they didn't get all that stuff cleared with regards to the COVID exemptions and all that. Ambrosius Blem. I consider myself a catch wrestler, although my training has been mostly in luta. I like the World Alliance. Marcus James. You can always stay with us. Actually, Marcus, what part of like do you live in Lancashire? Oh yeah, you said you. How far away do you live from Wigan? Ambrosius. What is the name of the book on Tom Connors? So the book that I was quoting from by Tom Connors it's called The Modern Athlete. So it's pretty interesting. It's called The Modern Athlete. Written so long ago, because we would consider it. We consider that like ancient times or whatever. So long ago. All right, Marcus, 25 minutes away. So, oh, that's great. Yeah, one of the things uh, that is written in the book by Tom Connors is he mentions like he actually makes a big list about not everyone, but quite a lot of the wrestlers that he beat, or at least he competed in. He does mention that he has lost and whatnot, and he mentioned some by name. Um, but one person, so thinking about the snake pit, it's actually in this area called Aspul, and um, Tom Connors mentions somebody from there too. So it's really interesting to once if anybody ever gets a chance to go visit that area, to make sure you travel. Try to look around and see Bolton and all these areas nearby, even the bigger cities nearby like Manchester, and then on the other side, Liverpool and all that. You can kind of get an understanding of the region. So then when you read these books, it's one of the things that I do like seeing, is that when I read some of these old books and they mention these different locations, and I can at least picture it because maybe I passed through there or been there, and so it's pretty interesting. It really makes it come alive. Marcus James, we have the Snake Pit World Championships coming up in June. All right, so are you going to be competing, Marcus? Also, let me see, Ambrosius Blem, Tom Connors, the modern athlete. So it's not Garner. So Tom Connors. Thea D, have you heard of the Jamaican catch wrestler back then? I believe so. We should probably try to do something about that history, and also even a little bit about Billy Riley. I think he deserves a good looking after, or at least helping people to remember the stuff he did, because a lot of times his students, a couple of them, get a lot of the spotlight, and he's really the one that made these people into who they are. So he definitely needs um, a lot of a lot of credit. Marcus James, we have the International Intensive Training Week coming up soon. All right, we definitely have to look into that. Maybe we can kind of share about it too, so everyone can at least know about it. Ambrosius, have you heard of Glima? Yes. Marcus James, yes, I'm competing again. All right, very cool. Do you think, Marcus, if you could, like, were any of your matches posted online or on YouTube or anything? And please send me the links if they are, if they're available. I'd love to see them. Yeah, you can just message. Yeah, anywhere really. Were there any legit Mexican catch wrestlers? Me. No, um, no, I was born in the United States. Um, Shinhei catch and luta has no boundary. So on submissions, where BJJ bans so many subs, restricts students from practicing leg locks. And if I had the choice, I'd want to learn catch and luta over BJJ. Unfortunately, Shinhei is in New Zealand, so they have primarily jiu-jitsu stuff. Marcus James, yes, okay, I will send them on Facebook. Thank you. Shinhei, here in New Zealand, there are no catch or luta, nor luta. BJJ has monopolized grappling here in New Zealand. Thea D, represent. LOL. All right. Wow. Okay, so just to recap, we're talking about Tom Connors and his main points for success. And so he talks about catch wrestling in particular. So a catch wrestler should still have understanding of other grappling styles. So he talks about this after he actually does a little recap on the different rule sets of a variety of martial arts, or a variety of grappling arts. So he says, to be successful, a catch wrestler should still understand these other styles. The other thing he talks about is gameness. So basically, showing up, getting in there and actually doing the work, doing the competition, going for it, right? Acting, doing it. Then the other thing would be science. So you can kind of think of that as a technique. And then the other thing was endurance. He often mentions, like he liked the, I think, the speed walking or the running and all that. So um, stuff like that, doing the cardio, doing the strength and conditioning stuff. And then the last one was the mindset, right? The cool, clear head, the way he writes it, right? So um, having that mindset. So yeah, one of the things could be like, so when we talk about what's the difference between gameness and that cool, clear head idea, or the mindset. So I mean, maybe you can be. I think we kind of touched on it before, where it's like some people maybe force their kids to do stuff, and so they're physically there right at the competition, but then mentally it might not be there, right? So they might show up to do the activity, but you got to have that the mental aspect behind you in order to perform well, and also basically to perform for a long time as well, because you have to understand better where it's like, if you have good tech, if say if you have technique and you don't have this calm mind, then you might just get beat. You might get overpowered by someone. You wouldn't know how to counter if if you get overwhelmed and whatnot. So you got to have that cool, clear head, right? Right. So that's one of the aspects. Or that's one of the differences, right? So there's more to just showing up, right? There's more to it than just that. Yeah, Ambrosius Blem. It's like, that's a pity. Talking to Shinhee in New Zealand about how there's very little. It was like, it's mostly jujitsu. But yeah, have us over. We're happy to go over to New Zealand. I wonder if New Zealand is allowing anybody from the United States over, because we're just struggling with the whole COVID thing. Um, all right. In Ambrosius, the Kimura is called Americano and Luta Libre, one of the hints towards the American roots and with English roots, right? And so, kind of one way to kind of recap with that is the whole idea of where Tom Connors, after beating Farmer Burns, again, they worked together a lot. So even doing some different entertainment shows and whatnot. So they did end up spending a lot of time together. And so then Frank Gotch told, or kind of talked about, um, Tom being like his, like, Farmer Burns coach. And then Frank Gotch then said that Martin Burns was his coach. All right. So you can see how the lineage then progressed. But from Lancashire, that we got the Tom Connors being born there, and then doing tons of competition in England, coming to the United States, and then kind of uh, training Martin Burns from there. What? So Ambrosius? What? He beat Farmer Burns? Yeah, yeah, he beat him. And I believe the first time they met to compete, I believe they did a 3 round or a 3 match thing, and he beat Farmer Burns all 3 times very fast. Let me see. It wasn't even like and then I think they met a while later, maybe like maybe a few months later or something, and he beat Farmer Burns again. I'd have to look back in the book though. But yeah, he totally destroyed. Oh yeah, my next customer was Martin Burns. So he doesn't have a date right here, but it says my next customer was Martin Burns, the champion of Iowa, whom I defeated in 3 straight falls. 9 minutes, first fall, beat him in 9 minutes. 7 minutes, beat him in 7 minutes in the second time, and 3 minutes. So the time just decreased every time. So Martin Burns put up a good fight. Uh, they put up a good fight for a good 9 minutes the first time, and then it was probably just um, demoralized, especially by the last fall. It was only 3 minutes. So that was it. It's probably enough to impress Martin, so that Martin was like, "I got to learn from you," you know. So that's the other thing that I definitely wish there was a little bit more of, because I totally, beat a lot of people and in training, and then they do talk about like, oh, since. So like I'll roll at a different school, and then I teach at a MMA school here in Los Angeles, and some people have had that mindset and they come to take my class. I don't necessarily go to another school to try to get students or anything like that, but um, but then you'll have some people who have the mindset where it's like, oh, I do jujitsu so that you beat me over and over, but if I do more jujitsu, I'm gonna eventually beat you, and that's another attitude that I've seen as well. But I wish we can get more people doing the catch wrestling thing. Ryuken. Actually, no. There's a few. Oh, you guys are commenting real quick. Okay. Ryuken. Uh, Coach, your video with the double wrist lock throw is great. High percentage throw for me, especially when it's unexpected. Sometimes I still get the throw if I miss posting at their foot ankle. Great. Sounds great. Wow. Oh, Ambrosius Blem. Wow, that's crazy. Was Farmer Burns in his prime? Yeah, definitely. This is before he met Frank Gotch, even. Um, Shinhi, Ambrosius. Do Luta school practice the leg lock? At what level do they teach leg locks? Jonathan Jimenez. Man, we need them demos to show the world. Yeah. Actually, speaking of demos, I found a hard drive with a lot of our seminars on there. So um, I think I started. Well, I think I shared a clip of one on our social media, but I'll be putting up longer clips for those in our membership site, and also for those who have a membership to our YouTube channel. So I'll be including those in both locations. But for those of you who want to become, like students, then you go to our catchwrestlingalliance.com, our CWA Academy. We'll start including. I started to upload those, and I'll be giving students access to those very soon. I didn't know I had that actually. I thought that hard drive only had match footage, which is we've already posted years ago. So I didn't know we had this extra stuff. Right. And so then if you want to become a member of our YouTube channel, right, then you can join at the second tier, the medium tier. Then you can get access to those. I'll be uploading those after I edit them. But I already have, I believe, one up there. At least one is uploaded. So I'll definitely make that available to those members right away. There's no real it's not like it's set up as like a regular YouTube video. It's just you just get to see us teaching um, uh, people in Singapore. Jonathan Jimenez. Don't forget everyone to check out the Fujiwara Cradle Guard break with cool submission setups. Oh yeah, so one of the videos that we did a few weeks ago with Jonathan is the Fujiwara Cradle, but we also have that as part of our latest offering from our website. So it's called the Pressure Pass System Volume One. There we have a lot of different ways to use a cradle. If you're in a no-gi situation, you can use a cradle, get out to pin the person, but also we have several submissions, neck cranks, leg locks in there, different kinds of variations from when someone's closed guard, right, and kind of starting with a cradle to counter, right. So that's up on our website as well. I keep on forgetting to kind of talk about it, but it's really great. Ambrosius. I would like to watch how catch. I would like to show catch like WWE because the show of these old destructive throws and slams. Ryu Ken. Throws are a great tool to avoid landing in guard and having to deal with high level BJJ practitioners guard. Yeah, yeah. If you can, no, that's right. I don't even think there's anything else that we have to say. It's like that's pretty much it. It's if you do the throw really well, then you usually land past their guard. All right. Okay, so we're nearing the hour mark. So I think actually, I think you guys, if you have any more questions, I mean, you guys are having a lively chat, but we'll probably start to um, shut it down. Oh, Ambrosia. Okay, great. Ambrosia's Blim. Cradles. Love them. BJJ guys who always ball up, hate them. And then Jonathan Jimenez. It's like, yeah, they do. And Marcus. Yeah, thank you. So you just sent the matches. I'll definitely take a look at those. Really excited to see that. All right. Okay, so um, consider at least subscribing to the YouTube channel if you're watching this on YouTube, um, or subscribing wherever you hear podcasts. That all supports us. You can consider becoming a member of our YouTube channel. But if you want to become also a student, then consider joining our Catch Wrestling Alliance Academy at our website. We're definitely. I've actually over the holiday break. I've 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 made a bunch of different material that will be updating some of that in uh, some of the programs that we have in the CWA Academy. So for our members, like our current members and new members and stuff. So I want to uh, try to change it up a little bit, modernize it, I guess, the way Tom Connors might say. Um, so I want to just continue making improvements. So there's always plenty for the CWA members. So yeah, thank you very much for your support. Feel free to ask us any more questions. I think next week we'll continue talking about Tom Connors and different aspects. We'll probably talk about the training aspect next because that's the very next chapter. All right. Thank you very much. We're here to help you elevate your grappling, and together we'll keep real wrestling alive.